Thank you for the opportunity. It's really a good place to be in. I've seen a lot of interesting talks. خصوصا هاني الأحدى الSTC was just before me. I mean, if you guys listened, it's really good content, and you can all access it later. From my part, so everyone looked at the title. It's COVID-20. So many people messaged me before the conference saying, COVID-20, is it really gonna be called COVID-20? I was not talking about the virus or the next pandemic, but we all know by now that it's gonna happen again. If it's not a virus, it's an economical shift. If it's not that, if it's a political change. If it's not that, it's an earthquake or Armageddon. So, or a stock market crash. So we all know that after this, we woke up to see that really we live in an unstable business world, but at the same time also with lots of opportunities, because with instability, you always get creative and you get more reactivity from the markets, etc. So that's why I called it COVID 2020. وكمان لأنه everyone has COVID-19 in their titles. so that's part of it. I'm going to start first to talk about myself and my company, about WonderEight, because if you understand how WonderEight has been operating, you will see the relativity in the points we're gonna discuss. So I started WonderEight with Boudy Nasralah, my brother, who you're gonna see, by the way, on the 6th in the Lebanon chapter of the conferences. I started in 1999. So not only we're celebrating our 20 years now, but we've always been growing organically. We've never had partnerships, we've never had funding, we've never had support or any corporate governance, if you want, since we started. So the fact that we grew organically from 2 employees to more than 50 in 4 countries made us really adapt day by day and not wait for things like COVID to react. So if we look back at the cycle we've had, every 3 to 4 years, we've shifted WonderEight completely, either from the servicing or the technology or the service we offered. And this made us, sustain through the time and even stay as an independent agency. So what do we do in a nutshell? We help businesses make more sales. We help brands be created. We help, if you want, launch new products or new services. And we do this by creating either merging technology and creativity, and also providing a very measurable tools to measure what we're doing. So in a nutshell, I think the difference between my talk and maybe the bigger talks like STC is that we're tiny compared to the others. And I always like to, as much time as we have, to try to give out or share what we learn and what we solve in our small business, because we are an SME. We're a bit even smaller than an SME. And the things we apply cannot be applied by corporate structures, and the corporate talks that we all listen to cannot always also be applied by companies like us. So the things that we pass by are much more beneficial for smaller companies, and they're rare to find because people like us just don't have time to prepare any talks. Bridging to that, we have a very dear colleague called Rabia Khadr, who does a lot of public speaking training and helped us in many services for our HR departments. He told me to always prepare and rehearse before the conferences, and so that's what I did. I did it like an hour ago. So we're really not learning that part. So we are tiny, but we're complex. So the smaller we are, we're very complex because we do serve multiple countries. We have multiple services, and we have multiple clients in multiple industries. So imagine the the complexity of a business that is at the same time small but very diverse. Let alone, I mean, not being a corporate structure and growing needed tools to solve every day. So we had to be efficient. We could not afford systems like SAP, SAP. We could not afford Microsoft Azure or cloud. And we learned to use the tools that are accessible to us. And we'll talk about this when we get to the technical part. The fact that we have 4 offices, we are the main office started in Beirut, and then we opened Dubai, and then London, and then Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. So the fact that we have multiple offices gets even more complex because our sales are not balanced between the offices. So we have an office in Riyadh that is much bigger sales generator than our office in Dubai, for example, but the staff there is bigger than the staff in Saudi. So we have a different staffing and resources in offices that serves other offices. And this made us create, if you want, something we call the international team. It is a team that is growing very large the last 2-3 years, that is fully international, has visas everywhere, travels all the time, and meets all the clients, and are always in remote work. So they work in a business lounge, they work on an Uber, they don't even have desks, so they have hot desking in every office, and they just roam around the 4 offices. And this has been very efficient, and it has been not only on a resource cost, but also on if you want, market knowledge. So we never serve a Saudi client, for example, with people living in Beirut, because although we have very similar cultures, we still have a lot of local adaptations and local culture to learn. So spending 3 weeks in Riyadh for 5 years makes you understand the culture much better. So this is one of the things. The second one is that we have a very diverse industry mix in our clients, and this made us, and I've been advising that to many of my friends and many startups even, who focus on one industry and try to serve it as much as they can. In times like these, if you have a bank or if you have a cinema that you're serving, you're completely out of business. But if you have FMCG, FMB, corporate, fintech, delivery and logistics, supermarkets, and cinemas, you can always balance the load to retarget your resources in the right direction. And this made us survive. I think people ask me, how did you get a big hit after the COVID? Our hit is double than all other agencies around the world, because we had COVID, but on top of a very big economical downturn in Lebanon. So in Lebanon, everyone lost 80% of their clients. We lost maybe 40, but this has really, on top of, even on top of the COVID crisis. And with all this, we managed to not let go anyone, and survive, and not reduce the salaries. So having multiple industries is a very, very big, if you want, guarantee for the future, and for the, although I'm saying something that is easy, that looks easy to do, you have to develop multiple skill sets, you have to develop, different market approaches. But I think with the tools we have now, with the website and with the social media channels, you can really advertise easier what you do and try to attract much more diverse clientele. Also, we have a multidisciplinary service. So we don't just do advertising and marketing. We create games and apps. We create social media campaigns. We create packaging for the FMCG industry. We campaigns and marketing and whatnot. So to be able to do that, you really also have to have a very, a different approach with clients. So developing an app for a client requires much less intervention and physical meetings than working on a creative campaign that's going to be nationwide. So even inside our company, we have to, have each team, if you want, set its own rules of remote working, because it's like I'm saying at different degrees. So the digital team is already called digital, so digital is already ready for that. But the PR team, or the media and the advertising team has to be, at the client premises, and we encourage that a lot. This is the only thing, by the way, that we could not solve during the COVID lockdown, because we've always nurtured the culture of be at the client, don't be at the office. So spend more time at the restaurant of this client or at his offices to listen to their needs, to problem solve directly with them, and to know exactly what they want, instead of saying at the office and taking the brief by email or by a quick meeting. This we could not solve, to be honest with you. So what we're trying to do is just give random calls and check if everything is okay, other than the daily conferences. One important thing also that we've done is a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, we started a 4 days a week work schedule. And we wanted to test it to see if it works, and it did. It was because we had the feeling that we are overworking, and we could have, be much more efficient in our timing if we rest more. So if the cutoff period is more than 2 days, more than a week, and that is already mixed and cut by different time zones between here, London, Saudi, and Dubai. If we expand the rest period, we go back on a Monday or on a Sunday with much more energy and more focus to be able to work much more efficiently. And in the last 6 months, the reports we've done proved that 4 days a week is as efficient as 5 days a week. So already before the pandemic and before all the problems, we saw that there is space to shrink the time spent. There is a lot of time spent wastage. And if you don't have that luxury, you have to use every minute of your day. And when you do that, you gain a lot of time resting and being with your family and your second home, which is actually your home. So this is about that. So now for the technical tips. So what I know you've heard this from everyone, and Hani already before me, covered the whole spectrum. But what I want to say to everyone, that we're already there. Everyone's already there, 90%. We've been doing, conferences. The tools have been there for more than a decade. Even before Skype, MSN was there, Skype was there, Skype was working very well. Myself, I've done conferences from an Uber car because I was late on a meeting. And this is 5 years ago. So everything's been ready. We've been doing that without knowing, but we were always afraid. I think the barrier was being afraid of how do you look in front of the client, and how is this professional or not? Am I gonna make it or not? And all that COVID has done is just boost that, accelerated the whole leap to start being very practical, working remotely, doing less meetings at the premise. And what I'm trying to say is that we are already there. What is left, the 10% left now, is just, to fine tune what you're doing, do it more professionally, train your staff, etc., etc. So it's not a big deal. Be practical about it. Already just by, watching all the videos of Bayt.com now, that will be at the end of these 2 weeks, you'll have a plethora of, content to dig into and to learn from. This is one thing. So for the, very concrete technical stuff, being connected is important. So the most important thing in any remote work or anything is the connection, which people don't really tackle all the time. The connection itself is it's the lifeline. It's the electricity. If it stops, everything stops. So we've encouraged people to always check their connection beforehand. We've sent our IT person to check every employee's house or home office to make sure they're well connected, there are no glitches. Sometimes a simple $30 router can be replaced to have a much better connection. And also at the same time, test and test and test. So test it before you go, test the code before you do it. If it doesn't work, have fail-safe scenarios. So very easy to, just switch to your 3G when you're out of network or the Wi-Fi is not working. And you have to comfort your employees by saying, be practical, solve what you have to solve, and we'll take care of it later. So if your 3G bill is bigger than it should, we will cover the rest, and etc. So also so this is for the connection. For the tools themselves, people talk about I'm hearing a conversation about huge tools that are expensive to maintain. But there are a lot of tools out there, and there is no one right solution. So a WhatsApp call can work as easy as that, as free as that. Inter-countries, because Saudi with the ban of WhatsApp, Zoom can work, Teams, Microsoft Teams can work. So the only importance of choosing the software is to make sure it is something that is free for the client. He doesn't have to pay to get it. And it is almost mainstream. So try to not to dig out an app that no one has. And this creates complexity and more hassle to be prepared for a meeting. What else? Yes, for the video calls, also very practical info. Do them 10 minutes before. You need 10 minutes to enter. In a physical meeting, you need 15 minutes for everyone to come. Who's doing the coffee, who's still waiting on another call, who didn't find a chair in the conference room to sit, so at least 15 minutes in the physical world. Give it 5 to 10 minutes for the digital world, and connect 10 minutes before. Make sure the connection is working, everyone's faces is showing, etc. This is important. And also give 10 minutes after the call, because when the call is done, we're not in a physical space anymore, so we cannot reconvene and realign. Always give 10 to 15 minutes maximum to put an action plan after the conference call. One important thing that comes after the connection is the file system. So people need to access their files. There's so many solutions also, from very expensive cloud systems to very easy, take your hard disk with you and pass by once at the office to fill it with files. But we're so lucky that we have free tools like Dropbox, like Microsoft Cloud, like OneDrive, etc., Google Drive, and they are all very accessible, very easy to use, and they don't need even an IT to set them up. Now, the things get bigger. In our case, for example, our smallest files are 200, 300 megabytes, even 1 gigabyte in size, because we're in the creative industry. And for this, we solved it by using a hard disk, an external hard disk that employees put at home, but it's synced on the cloud with Dropbox. So it's also working. Bigger files, they have to pass once, once to pick them out from the office, but we did solve it for, 500 megabyte files, which is more than enough. If you want, and this is a tip for everyone, if you'd like any technical advice or best practices on the softwares you're using, you can please send me an email or buzz me, and I'll connect you to the right person to help you out. So it could be from a very complex system, and then again, why I'm saying we're 90% there, because it could be as easy as, I had a client 2 days ago that's saying, the file is very big, it's 20 meg, I'm gonna have to send it by mail, but I don't know if it passes, let me send it in WeTransfer. And 10 minutes ago, he sent me a Ramadan video of 33 megabytes. So I just told him, take it, drop it in WhatsApp and send it, it's done. We're already talking on WhatsApp, so you don't need to overthink it or complicate things. We're in a world that technology has been so free and accessible that, everything really works technology-wise. And finally, the time management. So I love what Hani Al-Ahdal from STC talked about, the productivity culture. This is really not the next, but this has to be applied by everyone. It's a culture of productivity, not a culture of timing. But then again, this is not easy at all, because when we count on employees to not to time themselves, but to produce, so when we measure our KPIs on deliverables, not on time spent, it will be very hard to correct it or help the employee do better if we don't know how much time it took him to do the task. So it's easy to say, but timing also, there's a lot of tools and we're using many that are very efficient. Keep the timing and but make it very simple for the employee. It has to be very simple to time yourself in a Zoom call or on working on an Excel file. And when you have that, you can compare it with the productivity and see where the gaps are. If the task is taking a lot of time, this is something the employee needs help with. If the things are being delayed, it's a question of multitasking and not knowing where to stop and what to continue. So productivity culture, yes, but it still has to be managed in time for now until the culture is really very well oiled up that you know and you can count on everyone to only count on deliverables, no matter how much time they spent on it. So it's very hard to every person in the company to be able to manage and time himself, instinctively on each task. That's about it. That's about it for the technical. Now for the Mohammed, I don't know how much time has passed. I have one more section, but I'd like to keep it for next week for Walid to tackle it, which is more HR related.
No worries. So we have time and we can do a little bit more if you'd like, and we can take questions from the audience as well. And we have a couple of questions for you if you'd like to go.
If we have, let's do a small break with questions, and we have time, we continue the last section.
Sure. So I wanted to ask, because you are an agency that deals, in the B2B world, and we know that, obviously there are many other organizations that are facing the fact that certain industries are, severely impacted, some industries are moderately impacted, some industries have actually been positively impacted. So there's a lot of fluctuation. So what has been your experience in that? And would you maybe share some of the industries that you're working with that have increased their demand for work and maybe decreased their demand?
Sure. Then again, we're lucky to have a very diverse clientele. So we've seen everything. We've seen from companies completely closing to companies doubling their sales. It's amazing, to see that in 1 month or 2 months. This never happened before. So from the big losses are companies we work for in the entertainment industry, which one of them happened to have the opening of their cinemas on the lockdown date, exactly 1 day before. So they did the demo opening and closed for life, for at least 3, 4, 6 months, because this is the last thing people will go to, after COVID. But then again, there's a lot of solutions that can be offered, and people have to really be very smart about that. So converting the services, for example, we turned this movie theater, we worked together to turn it into an F&B service. So if you really can't go to the movies, but if you're watching a movie, you can have in one click delivered your whole movie box, which is popcorn, Pepsi, nachos, and even download a movie for free from their server. So people cannot come to them, they went to their homes. But still, again, this is, just a gimmick to keep the brand alive. But the business is of course suffering tremendous losses. On the other side, clients like big, very huge FMCG companies, like poultry, for example, have not only increased their sales, but are out of stock. So it's here, the problem is, another problem is about helping them be digital and take online orders, first of all. Second of all, manage the crisis on a PR level and on an image level, and because people will go to the supermarket and not find the brand, and you have to manage that the best way possible. So, here we have it, from the, people in really bad situation to people having a problem in over sales.
Great. And I think we have a question that relates to that as well. Someone was asking, because you mentioned your involvement also in some games and apps development.
Mm.
Do you see that certain industries are leaning more towards that at this time?
Of course, we manage. We are a lot into the delivery business also. So we also have a huge delivery, the number one delivery app in Lebanon that closed its doors and went bankrupt just before the COVID. If it had survived, it could have been, really, it would have made it. But it was due to the COVID situation. They suffered a lot and they lost a lot. But we also have Jahiz. Everyone in Riyadh know Jahiz. By the way, I miss all Riyadh people. مشتاقكم والله. I miss الفوال and especially الكبدة. شو بدي أعمل. But I hope I'll be back soon. So in the delivery business, the apps have proven also everything accelerated. So the apps have proven to really salvage a company, having an app that is accessible really saved the day. But then again, there's still the bottleneck in everything that's apps and online delivery. People thought that people don't consume a lot online because they're not ready to consume online. Actually, they don't consume online because they have a very bad experience when they consume online. They have the worst interface. They have many buttons to click, a huge time to get your order going. And now, because everything is accelerated, they're learning to make their app flawless, their experience flawless, so you can order quickly with no errors. And this is doing very well, actually. The only problem is, developing a good app takes time, and many people now many businesses reacted to be online and to sell online, but they did not take care of the logistics. They did not care of the stock and how to get to people. There's a huge, operation behind an app, a huge operation, and it needs time. You cannot do this in just 2 weeks because everything's on lockdown. So
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's good. It's nice to see that there are, despite obviously all the difficulties that resulted from the crisis, there are many opportunities also, and
Yes.
learning lessons, and there are ways that different sectors and different companies adapted really quickly, which is very good. And it's nice to hear also that from your own experience with WonderEight, you said that you've always been, agile, and if you worked under different conditions and in the different markets, which gave you that experience to sort of, adjust to these situations. So are there some lessons also that you think will apply to other companies, maybe in terms of like crisis management, having always kind of an alert mode on for anything that comes down?
There's a lot. There's a lot, but things I can remember now is one of them is we always talk about being proactive. So try to be proactive as much as you can, but no one can be proactive and be ready if you don't have time for it. If you're always, doing the daily, you can never be proactive because your nose is stuck in what you're doing now and the problem you're solving now. So what we've learned is to, dedicate time that is crucial and, no one can touch, to go out of your bubble, take time out of your business. I know it's hard, but even take time out of your family and have this very small moment when you can think of, the business as a holistic view. And once you do that, you start predicting the future. And you start saying, oh, we're not doing that. This is coming. We have to be ready for it. And this is something I never did. I never was able to do because I love working on the now and on the tasks now. And this is what the advantage of having my partner being my brother, Walid, who is, he's the guy looking out for the holistic way forward. So he saw the 4 days coming. He saw even the remote work coming. He saw the economical downturns and how much other services we have to start offering. So if you don't have a brother and your mother still has time to get kids, just ask for another brother if she's not too old. But at the same time, if you're not being able to be proactive, what we've learned from, because there are some things we did not prepare for, of course, if you're not be able to be proactive, when you're reactive, react very fast. So when you see that you missed the train, and for example, the devaluation of the Lebanese lira now, for example, if you take more than a week to react, you lost half of your sales. So when you notice this, this red flag that we missed that, don't say, okay, we missed it. Let's now do it the right way. Let's think of it. Let's plan it. It's already too late. Just, leave everything, work on it, solve it, and apply it. So if you don't proact, react fast.
I agree with you, and I think even if certain companies were not proactive or did not have a plan in place for such crisis, now that we've all gotten a sense of urgency all around the world, now hopefully everyone will be more prepared to face, God forbid, any more crisis that we have.
Yes.
So in terms of the day-to-day work and issues related to work hours and remote work. So you mentioned a few things about that, and you mentioned that it was easier maybe because you are a smaller team. Do you think there are some changes that will happen even after the pandemic is over? Are there practices that you're going to continue to implement?
I think the biggest change, not on the short term, but on the long term, is what Hani talked about, is nurturing a culture of productivity, not of timing. Because to be honest, we will not be able to manage everyone's time. Even us, how small our company is, we still cannot really manage the time. And managing the time that closely, remotely, is also stressing for the employee. It has to be based on productivity. So this will challenge the employees to learn how to manage their own time and to be accountable for their deliverables and their deadlines. You can see it in most employees who had freelance before, who had dull consulting jobs before, they're more adapted to that. And employees who were always in a big structure, in a big agency, they tend to get lost when they're not really helped in time management. So I do believe there's much more to talk about on the HR level. There is things like the culture. How do you keep your culture, the company culture? How do you keep it at the home office, at the employees' homes? And inshallah, we'll talk about that with Walid next week. But from that point of view, I think the future that's coming is productivity, because there is no hidden layer anymore between the client and the agency and the employees. So everyone sees everything, and everyone has to understand that if we do not deliver, the client will not pay. And if we did a job, and it's well done, the client has to pay for it. He has to see the resources we're spending. There is no hidden layers, of big profitability like before, or there's no buffer anymore. Companies used to have a good margin of a good leeway between the pricing and the cost that can adjust on last minute changes or problems, or staff being recruited not budgeted for. But now the margins are thin, and having a thin margin opens everything to transparency. And so it goes down to this smallest employee to the biggest client. They all know how the business works, and when you know how the business works, you will be encouraged to be productive.
Thank you for that. And I want to reiterate on the point that you mentioned about also culture and the HR strategy. I think a lot of it also goes back to that, because of most of the questions that we've been receiving during this expo about how are you managing people who are working remotely, the productivity, etc. And it's true that it all comes down to what strategy I have put in place for recruitment, even in the first place, for the type of culture that I have built in the company, and how closely I'm aligning everyone that I'm hiring and onboarding to that. to make sure that, at the end of the day, I'm trusting people and I'm holding them accountable for their work. It's not so much a matter of policing, because, even if I'm in a regular setting, and even if I'm in a normal office and everyone is present, there's still no sort of clear-cut way of knowing that everyone is being 100% productive and focused and all of that. So it really comes down to also certain values and certain traits that come as part of the overall recruitment and culture of the company. And we're very excited to hear more from Walid on this.
Yes, this will be the next session. We will talk a lot about the play seriously. This is our slogan. So play seriously hasn't been more right than ever now. So you're playing at house, but you're playing very seriously to get results. So he will talk more about that next week.
Great. So I encourage everyone to tune in next week for a Walid session as well. So we have a couple more questions. With an SME, you'd have a smaller management team that needs to go back and forth between the different offices. And I know we've talked a little bit about this before, about your travel to Riyadh. How have you dealt with travel restrictions?
Yes, this is a big point. We were lucky enough that the travel restrictions only affected us a week maximum, because after that week, even inland, restrictions were applied. So even if they were in the Riyadh office or if in the Dubai office, they cannot see the client anyway. So so this helped us. This helped us still working remotely, and we were lucky to do that. But in other times, if the travel restrictions are done, but the inland logistics are not stopped, there will be a problem. But I think by that time, people will learn how to value, not to overvalue a physical meeting if it can be done remotely. So we work with a lot of clients in Qasim, and Qasim is a 4-hour drive, 4.5-hour drive from Riyadh. And we used to go there every, once a week for a simple meeting, and now it's going flawlessly on Skype and on Teams and on Zoom. So yes, this has evolved. The cultures have accepted it. The business owners have accepted it, and they're going to see that it's going to be more practical for both parties. But that does not say at all that physical contact is not important, especially in our region, Beirut or Riyadh or Dubai. It's about seeing people. It's about being with them every day, and this should never be stopped. So you can go have a coffee at the client and then do the meeting remotely. Imagine the difference.
Thank you for sharing.
I don't know if I answered well with the team.
It does, obviously, and maybe this also connects to the next question that comes up, because with the current situation and because of also some financial restrictions that different companies have faced. So you've mentioned that you've been able to face this pandemic with no layoffs, and you've been able to balance between productive employees and everything that has to get done. Have you had any issues with unproductivity or shortcomings? And in what way have you been able to, sort of maintain everything at the same level despite having to do any layoffs or salary adjustments?
The problem is not finished yet, so we are not at the end of it. So I'm sure there's more problems coming on. What we experienced till now, it's true that we did not lay over anyone from the situation itself. We did lay over people who are on a different, like Hani was saying, when you look at it from far and when you measure it, because you have to measure when they're remote, you will see the gaps and you will start evaluating employees. So you might, run into someone who is really not being needed a lot, but there are very good elements in the company that are pillars to the company. And who do not have, like an event manager, for example. This guy has been with you for more than 10 years or 5 years, and you really cannot do anything about it. You have to keep him close, take care of him, pay him, and dig in the company reserves. Nevertheless, there are, everyone talked about this in other talks about, having starting with phase one, which is using the unpaid leave, phase two, using, there's many processes. So we've done a few, but very rarely. But unpaid leave is not a solution, because if you finish your vacation days, this month or the next, and then what? What's going to happen? So I think even unpaid leave has to be, cut down into 2-3 months, knowing that you cannot predict how long this will be. But we also did something very interesting, by the way, is that you always have to have and Walid's going to talk about this later. You have to have a list of things that you would like to do in your company, but you have no one to do it or no time to do it. And we've had that list locally. So we had the list of, making our online image stronger, writing more articles, even simple tasks like cleaning the offices and tidying stuff, archiving, working on beta solutions that we never had time for example, in apps and games, especially in the gaming now, where we wanted to develop new gaming engines to be more commercial and to survive. A game should survive more than a month if it has to give a result, for example, for a client. So all those were on a list, on a pipeline waiting, and now we're having the empty resources at hand work on those, even if they're not, asked by anyone. It's a list that we have to do internally.
Thank you, Boudy, for that answer. And it's also a good tip for companies maybe that are now looking at some vacant resources and how they can best use them.
And it could be really simple. It doesn't really have to be overthought. We're thinking of painting the whole facade of our building, for example, and it's a nice thing to do altogether.
Yeah, sure. Of course, some of the things that you always say, there's no time to do them. Now is the time.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your experience during this period. We hope things get better for all of us soon, and we hope you stay safe.
And if they don't, let's be ready for it.
Of course. And I would like to remind everyone that we have 2 more sessions coming up today. We have a session by the Learning and Development Manager at Thiqa, discussing how to utilize this pandemic to our favor. And we also have the Human Resources Manager at Saudi Water Partnerships Company, discussing the top opportunities and learnings that have come out of this pandemic. So we hope to see you starting at 3 p.m. KSA time today. And we hope you all enjoyed the session. Thank you so much again, Boudy, for being with us. And
thank you, Mohammed. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the other talks.